Good morning. If there's anyone who needs to connect to the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi name is GMA Guest. The password is capital G at cities, CITIES 2021.
Is that the Atlanta guy right there?
Yeah,
Okay,
Steve, exactly.
I will do it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. All right, good morning. I'm Rob Pitts. I chair the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County, and I'd like to welcome each of you here this morning. It is exactly 10 o'clock a.m. And I thank each of you for being here today as we, and by we, I mean Fulton County Board of Commissioners, our qualified cities, begin the loss negotiations for the distribution of revenue over the next decade. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll of the Board of Commissioners?
Chairman Rob Pitts,
Present.
Vice Chairman Liz Hausman,
Present.
Commissioner Bob Ellis,
Present.
Commissioner Lee Morris, Commissioner Natalie Hall, Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr., Commissioner Khadijah Abdul Rahman.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, we have 4 present. I think some may be joining us by Zoom. 5 present. All right, and would you call the roll for the cities that are present and their representatives?
City of Alpharetta, Mayor Gilvin.
Present.
City of Atlanta, Mayor Dickens. Thank you. Chattahoochee Hills, Mayor Reed.
Present on Zoom.
College Park, Mayor Motley Broom.
Present.
East Point, Mayor Holiday Ingram.
Here on Zoom.
Fairburn, Mayor Avery. Hateville, Mayor Hallman.
Tim Young, City Manager for Mayor Hallman.
Thank you. Johns Creek, Mayor Bradbury. Thank you. Milton, Mayor Jamison. Thank you. Mountain Park, Mayor Steele. Thank you. Palmetto, Mayor Bodie.
Here.
Roswell, Mayor Wilson.
I expect him to be here. Michael Petty, Assistant City Attorney.
Thank you. Sandy Springs, Mayor Paul. South Fulton, Mayor Khalid. Thank you. Union City, Mayor Williams.
All right, that's it.
He was here with 2.
Okay, thank you very much. And Commissioner Lee Morris is present with us on Zoom. So we do have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County. As you all know, we've allocated 2 hours for this initial meeting. And I already know that several of us have very tight stop deadlines today. So my goal will be to keep us on schedule. So let me apologize in advance if I have to interrupt anyone at any point, just to keep us on schedule, because we have a tight time frame. Now, it is my hope that these negotiations will be productive and that all parties will listen intently, but be respectful of the positions of the other parties. Just a quick note on background. Prior to the formation of the city of Sandy Springs, Fulton County's share of the local option sales tax distribution was approximately 35%. Now, these funds were allocated to the county's general fund. House Bill 36, which was adopted in 2005, modified that law. And this change in the law allowed the newly formed cities in Fulton County to receive a share of the lost revenue directly from Fulton County share. And following the formation of Sandy Springs, the cities of Johns Creek, Milton, and Chattahoochee Hills were formed. And Fulton County share of lost revenue after 2011 was 14.98%. Then, after the formation of the city of South Fulton, Fulton County's share was reduced to the current rate of 4.9%. The changes in Fulton County's portion of the lost revenue allocation has resulted in a reduction of approximately $668,392,000 over the last decade. And we're entering into these negotiations for the distribution of local option sales tax for the next decade. So there are four, I guess, key points that we want to talk about, well, not be aware of here today. The negotiations are beginning today, July 15th, and will continue for 60 days. Fulton County and the cities representing 50% plus one of the total municipal population of qualified cities must agree to the terms. If no agreement is reached after 60 days, the parties will enter into non-binding alternative dispute resolution, better known as arbitration. But most importantly, if no agreement is reached by December 30th, 2022, the local option sales tax will end in Fulton County. So with that as sort of background, let's begin. Each of you should have received a copy of an agenda which states a brief opening remarks, and we have an initial presentation by the Fulton County Commission consultant, Mr. Doug Eves. He will have up to, and I want to emphasize, up to 30 minutes. Please don't feel that you have to use the 30 minutes because we are on a tight time frame. Following his presentation, the municipalities have two consultants, Mr. Michael Graham and Mr. Andy Welch. And again, gentlemen, you have up to 30 minutes, but if you don't need the 30 minutes, please don't take it. And following the presentations by the two consultants, we will entertain, if it's okay with you, just questions regarding their, not the negotiations, but for them, any point that needs to be clarified at this point, because we're not necessarily, we're not negotiating today, but they'll have up to 30 minutes to clarify any statement that either of the consultants has made that you need some clarification on. And then after that, we will have reserved approximately 30 minutes to talk about our next steps, which should, and that'll conclude the meeting for today. And again, several of us have very hard stop. Commissioner Arrington is now joining us as well. So we have hard stops today. And so again, please excuse me in advance if I have to be a little abrupt with us to keep us on schedule. So with that, Mr. Eves, Doug Eves, who is a consultant for the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go to the slides, please. Thank you. The next slide.
Is everyone able to see okay? All right, all right. Continue.
Next slide, please. The chairman has quite adequately described the process that this group has to go through, so I won't repeat that. The county has expressed during the entire process that I've been working with them their hope that this is a positive environment where all parties listen and respect each other's positions. The chairman spoke to that. One thing I want to say as a consultant, the counties has made it quite clear that they're very proud of the new communication channels, the mayor's meetings that are taking place on a regular basis at this point in time. And they want to build on that new communication channels that have been put in place. Sometimes communication requires hearing hard truths and sharing hard truth with your partners. The county very adamantly believes that everyone here is a partner in the future of Fulton County and your growth and your development. As a consultant, I always tell my clients and the parties that we're working with that I go home. The attorneys go home. After all this is over with in January, when this loss is negotiated and put in place, and it's either remains or it's going away, whatever the results are, I'm gone. You have to remain here as partners and work together. You're in this together. You're a team for the future of Fulton County. And the county wants to approach it that way and with mutual respect, and like all partners, deal with each other in a fair manner. Next slide, please. The condition preceded of loss, what has to happen for the loss to even exist is to provide an equitable tax relief from ad valorem taxation by paying for services that would otherwise require county or taxation to provide those services. The current distribution in Fulton County relieves 33.3% of the municipal tax burden to pay for services. That's minus all the other fees and revenues that are out there, but just on the tax burden to pay for services, it pays for 33.3% of the municipal tax burden, but only 1.9% of the county's taxpayers' burden. Counties serve as an arm of the state government. That was their original intent and purpose. They were there to provide locally sheriff and the county jail, public safety, tax collection, tax assessment, and I'm not going to read all those, but public health and welfare as well. The county taxpayer needs this property tax relief from loss to help reduce the tax burden for those mandatory, constitutionally required, and statutorily required services. Fulton County's loss proceeds must be rolled back countywide. That was the original law said it would only be rolled back in the unincorporated area. In 1978, that was ruled unconstitutional. Now they have to roll it back. Since then, they have to roll it back countywide on the entire digest. And again, to reiterate, the county is the provider of last resort. And what we mean by that is the county is the provider of services that can transcend the municipal limits, the city limits, the pandemic, public health crises, emergencies, disasters, federal grants come down that could be applied countywide, emergency management. The county is the provider that can transcend and assist and work with all of the cities in your need. Next slide, please. As the chairman alluded to in his comments, due to the incorporation trend, the county's share has been reduced from 35% in 2000 to 4.9 in 2021. This statement is critical. The incorporation has no impact on the funding needed to provide the state mandated services or any county services providing countywide benefit. The county has no problem with incorporation. When incorporation happens, a group of citizens get together and say, we desire higher level services. They vote on it. They choose what services they want to provide. When they come together and they're incorporated, that removes them from the unincorporated special service district. They no longer require those services. As a prime example of what happens in 2018, after the city of South Fulton incorporated, the general fund expenditures went up 5%. The special service district, which was the unincorporated area, went down 37% in both revenues and expenditures. So you can see where the impact was. The GMA, whose wonderful building we're in today, states this very clearly in their SDS handbook, the GMA handbook on SDS, where they say county general fund revenues and local option sales tax cannot be used to fund services that primarily benefit the unincorporated area. That's absolutely correct. Title 3670, part of the Service Delivery Act, says that the services for the unincorporated area that primarily benefit those have to be paid for by unincorporated sourced revenues. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I apologize. There we go. The key point, it is critical for all of us to understand that the incorporation of areas of Fulton County did not reduce general fund service delivery responsibilities of the county government. The incorporation removes services in these unincorporated area in the special service district. The General Assembly illogically penalized the county by removing these general fund lost proceeds from the county share used to provide these mandated and discretionary countywide services. It's important to reiterate that the drop from 35% in 2002 to the current 4.9% was not negotiated away by the county. It wasn't during any of these type of meetings and consults where we worked together and agreed to that. As partners, we didn't sit here and negotiate that. It was ripped away from the county by the General Assembly. No regard for the debt, no regard for the need to provide countywide mandated services. We're just taken illogically, as we've already shown, from the general fund budget when the incorporation impacted the special service district. Irrational, illogical. This action forced the county to reduce or cut mandated services. It also limited their capacity to meet future needs. And as someone's already said, lost is a forward-looking tax. The county has a tremendous backlog on court cases. Pandemic is part of that, but inadequate staffing is another part of that. That impacts public safety. They've not had a new senior center in over 20 years to provide services to a moving, adjusting, growing population. Hold on a second. As Chairman said, over the past 10 years, the county has lost $668 million worth of lost revenue that was taken from them, not negotiated away, not bargained away, not part of a deal, was ripped from their ability to pay for debt, from their ability to provide services to the entire county. And if a citizen in one of your municipalities is hurting because they don't have the county services they need, that hurts your city as well. And we're hoping that you remember that point. Next slide, please. We look at 3 negotiation issues in this from the county's viewpoint. Does distribution provide a fair and equitable distribution as required by condition preceded? Does it give equal impact on your services that you provide as well as our services? Does the current distribution meet the express intent of the General Assembly? And I'll explain what that is in just a second. And we are required to apply a review to the 8 minimum criteria that have to be reviewed. We can use other criteria, but these are the 8 minimums that we have to consider. Next slide, please. The condition preceded is the only section of the statute that provides a formula. It says that all entities must adjust annually the millage for the ad valorem tax in an amount equal to the loss received. It must be fair and
Excuse me.
equitable.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, point of order. There are no slides, and since we don't have a copy, I can't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I couldn't see that it was not there. I apologize. I didn't know that. They're on a separate projector, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. There we go. Without objection, I'll restart. I'm sorry, there's some questions.
Michael Rowicki has copies. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, don't count my time. Right. Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead. As we said, this must be fair and equitable. The words fair and equitable are not in the statute, but the words fair and equitable are derived from the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution that are. I'm on, go next slide, please. Condition preceded. Is someone adjusting the slides? My numbers don't show on these PowerPoint. It should be the condition preceded page.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Okay, does everyone have? All right, does everyone have a copy now? Just a minute, please. Does everyone have a copy now?
Mine don't have numbers. I'm
All right,
sorry.
everyone has a copy now, and the slides are working. Continue.
All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Sir, in the back, are you adjusting? I'm sorry. Condition preceded, go back. There you go, thank you. Condition preceded. I've already defined what that means, but this provides the only formula specified in the law statute that you have to annually adjust the millage rate. It must be fair and equitable. And I've cited that that's in the Constitutional Equal Protection Clause. Next slide, please. What services are allowed to be paid for are to be provided by lost. The statutes dictate Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 3. It's been a lot of municipalities around the state use this point to take the position that you can only provide the 14 enumerated listed services as part of that. As the appellate court in Decatur Taxpayers versus Adams tells us, that ignores the beginning language of that statute or that part of the Constitution that says, in addition to and supplementary of all powers possessed by or conferred upon a municipality or a county, they're also allowed to provide these additional services. The courts have told us that the supplementary powers clause, which was originally Amendment 19, did not take away any powers of taxation or any powers to provide services that were already possessed by the county. So we're not restricted. In addition to that, if we were to follow the logic and listen to the only 14, then we would not harmonize with 3670, the Service Delivery Act, which says that those 14 services can only be provided in the unincorporated area of the county, the geographical unincorporated area of the county, or by agreement with one of the cities. Plus, they're permissive. And the only way those can get countywide funding is if they have a countywide benefit. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to read this list, but these are the mandated services that in statute counties are required to provide. Courts, magistrate court, tax assessment, tax appraisal, elections. Then we also have a group of services that the counties and cities can provide as discretionary services: mental health, health services, indigent care, certain miscellaneous services such as economic development, cooperative extension services, senior citizen services. Again, you can read those, so I'm not going to detail all of those. Next slide, please. Now we get to the fairness and equity portion. This shows the percentage of the tax burden that is paid for by lost. As I said earlier in my presentation, the county has a tax burden of $687 million. They only received in 2013 $13 million worth of loss to help pay for that tax burden, 1.9%. If you look at the municipal numbers, they received $252 million worth of loss to cover a tax burden of $758,000. If you just look at the expenditures, just the top two lines, top two rows, the county received $13 million against expenditures of $632 million. The city of Atlanta received $107 million for $560 million worth of services. Some of those, for example, the city of, let's see, Johns Creek received $20 million to offset $40 million. They received half, or paid for half of their tax burden, where the county only paid 1.92%. It's not fair. It's not equitable. It does provide for equal service cost reduction. Next slide, please. And I'm going to go through this real quickly. On a per capita basis, each one of the municipal residents receives $20.20 for every dollar received by a county taxpayer. Those are the numbers. You can see them. Next, as we talked about, one of the key negotiation issues is the 8 criteria. And what's important in that, it doesn't tell us how to consider, it doesn't tell us how to measure, it doesn't rank importance. But what is critical is what data will be used to measure or to consider those criteria. A major source of misunderstanding is whether the county uses countywide data or unincorporated data. So we sought guidance. Whenever we have a conflict or an issue with an understanding, then you go to the people that should be able to provide the answer. We went to the legislative branch of the government, judicial branch of the government, and the executive branch of the government. The General Assembly tells us that the commission proceeded is that the lost proceeds are required to be rolled back on the millage rate on the entire digest. And that rollback should be shown on the tax bill of each individual taxpayer in the subdivision. Once on the county-wide subdivision, and again on the municipal subdivision. So they've told us it's county-wide. The judiciary, the appellate court tells us very clearly in the Leibowitz case that the ad valorem tax reduction created by the local option sales tax is applicable to the tangible property within the political subdivision, not to property within the unincorporated area. So now we've had the legislative branch tell us and the judicial branch tell us that we use countywide data. And then in 2012, we appealed to the Georgia Department of Law, the Attorney General. And as typical when he's responding to a county, they sent out an advisory letter. Those advisory letters are the third level of opinion after official and unofficial that they use. The Georgia Department of Revenue and their general counsel tells us quite clearly that state agencies use these advisory letters to guide their conduct. They tell us that the phrase service delivery responsibilities of each political subdivision used in 48889 refers to the service delivery responsibilities to the county's entire population. The October 33rd letter extended that to B1 and B3, which is the daytime population served, and also the entire area, all the service responsibilities. Next slide, please. Therefore, the data used to determine the tax distribution must reflect the county's portion of the lost special service district. Any other data?
We have about 15 minutes left.
Thanks, sir. I should be in good shape. In 1994, the General Assembly added a renegotiation portion to the statutes. They required renegotiation linked to census. They said also that just because it's linked to the census, that population is no more important than any of the other criteria and shouldn't be given any more weight. It required a de novo or from scratch, from the beginning, analysis of the current service responsibilities and the existing funding. We've already talked about how it was punitive to be taking the money, just rip it away from the county. The renegotiation phase is the part to correct, to fix what was taken from one of your partners that you rely on to provide services that help your citizens. This is the time to fix it. The express intent, and I'm not read all of this, but it says, in requiring the renegotiations, the General Assembly charges the entities to analyze the service delivery responsibilities as they exist and the existing allocation of proceeds, and to make rational the allocation of those resources to meet such service delivery responsibilities. Next slide, please. So what's changed since the last negotiation in 2012? The county's population has grown by 15.9%. Yes, that happened in the cities as well. You had population growth. But all of your population growth combined also totals up to what the county has to provide services for. The digest has grown 51.8%. And yes, that has occurred in all of your entities. But combined, the county has to provide services for that. Expenditures have grown 28.7%. Yes, all of you had service growth as well, but the counties has gone up 28.7%. The tax burden to pay for those services has gone up 20.4%. That's the drivers for service. That's the first part of the express intent. The current financial distribution has dropped 9.02% from 14 to 4.98. So the current distribution is not logical. It's not rational to meet the existing service responsibilities as they were then, or as they are today, or as we project they will be 10 years from today. And again, the county didn't negotiate with you, any of our partners. Our cities didn't do this. The General Assembly took this action and ripped it away from one of your partners that impacted the services that your citizens in your cities receive from the county: senior citizen services, court backlog. Your citizens are hurting because another one of your partners is hurting. Next slide, please. The 8 criteria, again, I'm not going to go through this. How much change is needed? We look at this, we're required to. Go ahead, please. And I'm not going to read these. You have them available to you, and your consultants have, I'm sure, provided them to you as well. Service delivery responsibilities, these are the first 3. Next slide, please. The effect on debt, short and long-term debt. We accounted for that in the general fund expenditures that were needed to provide your debt service. We did account for revenue bonds because they have a dedicated revenue stream. We did look at geo bonded debt because that has a dedicated millage. It's been validated by a Superior Court here in the county. We know that a great deal of the debt also bears the brunt of having the full faith and credit of the municipalities charged to do that. But with all of your credit ratings that you have, default is not something that we would anticipate in your debt. And again, they did, when the General Assembly in 2005, when they put in Bill 36, did not consider the county's debt or their ability to pay for debt. The county should partner. You have to remember what they're going through for the past 17 years. Then we look at point of sale, and I'm sure this will come up again in the conversation. Then we get to what I call the SDS grouping, intergovernmental agreements, the use by one entity to subsidize another, and then the coordinated plan of county municipal services. Next slide, please. We use 6 metrics using countywide data to approach the criteria. We look at resident population, which is the entire population, daytime population, which is the resident population, plus the work numbers. That's the numbers that we can quantify by the U.S. Census. That's workers in and out of the municipalities. Expenditures for services, that's general fund expenditures, net digest, commercial digest we use to account for point of sale because that's the only independent, verifiable, mutually exclusive data that we have available to us. And then we look at tax burden equity. How much does the sales tax provide relief to the entities? And is that equalized? We know it's going to be different because of the numbers, the sheer volume of your expenditure, of the county's expenditures versus yours, but it should be equalized on a percentage basis. That tells us when we look at it, the county should, and the criteria distribution, we receive 44.5%. Don't have a heart attack. That's not what the county is going to be asking for. We look at population served, and I'm not going to go through those numbers, but when you look at the P1 charts from the U.S. Census Bureau and you call it Fulton County, it says 1,666,000 people. It doesn't tell you what the remainder of the county is, which is that little sliver of South Fulton that's left to be incorporated. That's not the population of the county. That's not the population that the county serves. The attorneys in the room will tell you, and I've worked with enough of them, so I have a layman's understanding of this, that in statutory interpretation, words have meaning. And when the words say the service delivery responsibilities of each political subdivision to the population served, that means the entire population served. Next slide, daytime population, 1,000,004, as the chairman rightly points out. When you count tourism and all that, it's over $2 million. 2 million people, I'm sorry. Again, that's in your cities, no doubt. You have to provide service for them, no doubt. We understand that. We thank you, we credit you with the services that you do. But you should remember that the county has services they have to provide to that group as well. Next slide, please. And I'm going to go through this real quickly. Counties are arms of the state. That did change in 1983 with the new constitution. Every resident, every visitor, every patient, every tourist, every student, and every employee in any of the 15 cities is still in Fulton County and must receive county services, or they're available to receive county services. The county acknowledges city services. The cities must acknowledge the county services. Next slide, please. We've gone through the general fund expenditures. You can see them. And I've already talked about what's the loss received to cover those services, but you'll see the numbers. It's in my metrics. Commercial digest for point of sale, those numbers are there. I'm not going to belabor that point. You can see them, but the county services the entire commercial digest with some level of countywide mandated, statutorily required services that they deserve credit for. The retail concentration, cities always bring up the point very validly that retail is typically collected in the central business district and has a concentration. But Dr. Jeffrey Dorfman from the University of Georgia, who's now the chief economist in the state of Georgia, quite rightly points out in his studies done in Georgia, that for every dollar received from that area, from that concentration, commercial and industrial, it only costs 40 cents to provide services. So these areas that you're talking about, the retail concentration that you have to provide all these services to, for every dollar of tax received, it only costs 40 cents to provide the services. And that's from the chief economist in the state of Georgia in his cost of service studies. And they were done in 2002, but they're still relevant.
About 5 more minutes, Mr.
Oh, okay, yes, sir. Thanks, sir. The criteria makes clear the obligation of all residents to provide these services in the county and the maintenance and prosperity of the central business district. The General Assembly recognized that the county had service responsibilities within the cities, within the municipal areas, the incorporated area. Georgia is a point of destination state, not a point of sale state. The only Department of Revenue recognized tax situs is the county. There's no mutually exclusive, verifiable, independent data to determine point of sale. Cities will attempt to use the commodities report from the Department of Revenue, which is countywide, and then use a 2017 economic census that only has an 85% verifiable reliability factor, and somehow manipulate into a number that shows what's been generated from the city. Even if it was valid, and I'm not going to question that at this point, it's not mutually exclusive because every point of sale that's within that city, every sale that's created by the city, also happens in the county. The county has to provide that service to that big box, to that store. I'm going to go through, next slide, please. Next slide. We'll skip that one. Next slide. The cities have additional revenue to help pay for the services to their area. When you look at the franchise fees, electric, gas, majority of these are not available to the county. And then you look at business occupations taxes, business licenses. The county, the municipal pool receives 132 million that pays 13% of theirs. The county only receives 3,260,000. But all that money has to be used in the special service district as required by law. They get to use none of that for their general fund expenditures. Next slide, please. We had 3 questions that we talked about at the beginning. What is the current distribution? Does it provide fair and equitable distribution? Tax relief, I'm sorry. The current distribution is inequitable because the county taxpayers are paying $157 more on their county tax bills due to the reduction from 35% to the 4.9% in loss. The service responsibilities of the county has grown, but the reduction in loss due to the corporation has made the distribution irrational. Next slide, please. We explored three issues: the condition precedent, the express intent, and the 8 minimum criteria. Next slide, please. Our calculations have shown that the equity distribution of the county should receive 45%, municipal pool 55. On a per capita distribution where everyone's treated equally, it should be 50-50. Express intent, based on the changes, the county would need a distribution of 45 to the municipal pool 55. The 8 criteria tells us again that number would be 45-55. Don't panic. That's not what the county is going to ask for. Next slide, please. The county's offer. Number you've been looking to see. The county wants to return to the pre-municipal level. Before it was ripped away by the General Assembly, what all you had agreed to as partners was a distribution that you could live with in 2002. Why? Next slide. It's the right thing to do. It corrects an illogical and punitive action against one of your partners by the General Assembly. All of the entities, except for the new cities that are here today, agreed to this number. They said, we can live with that in 2002. It doesn't match equity. It doesn't match fair share, but it's a step in the right direction and gets one of your partners back on good, solid footing to help provide services you need for
All right.
your citizens countywide. The impact on, sir?
Time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eves. Now, Mr. Michael Graham and Mr. Andy Welch, representing the municipality. Sir, do you have a handout?
I don't need the handout. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. No, we have it for you. We'll email it out to the group. It'll be very brief. Good morning. My name is Andy Welch. I'm representing most of the cities of Fulton County. Mr. Dan Lee is here representing the city of Sandy Springs. I am here to speak to you. First, let me thank Chairman Pitts, honorable commissioners of the Board of Commissioners, all the honorable mayors and council members, your distinguished city and county officials that are here, directors and officers. And also let me thank you for the esteemed guests that have joined us for this monumental day. It must come every 10 years. So we are here today to renegotiate or begin the renegotiation of the local option sales tax. This is a tax that offsets our property taxes for everyone in Fulton County. It is a sales tax that's collected. That means people that come into Fulton County from outside of Fulton County help contribute to that tax to help offset the property taxes for the property taxpayers in Fulton County. I did not receive a copy of the agenda beforehand, so I'm pleased to have been prepared to be here today to give you a presentation. And I think my presentation will be within the 30 minutes. However, I didn't know that was going to be the allocated time. Mr. Eves spoke of beginning with mutual respect, and that also includes a sharing of information and a willingness to communicate ahead of time and then forthrightly. So we will try to do that this morning, as Mr. Eves has already begun doing. May I have the next? Oh, and I want to thank Arthur, Benny, and Mike. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for putting together the coordinating the PowerPoint presentations and the audiovisual. And Mike was clear to tell me to make sure to tell him the next slide. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So we're going to divide up the counties and the municipal shares, and that's what we're doing over the next course of the next 6 months. December 30th is the deadline, not December 31st. So if you're banking on making a decision by December 31st, you'll be too late. We have to decide this by December 30th in order to submit a certificate for the extension of local option sales tax. If we do not, then it will lapse. May I have the next slide? All the cities in Fulton County are qualified cities. They're qualified municipalities under the statute. Statute says that the cities must provide at least 3 of the 6 listed services you see there. The Court of Appeals has been clear that the provision of those services by contract is sufficient to constitute a provision of services. This is even true when a county or government provides that service by private contractor. So the Supreme Court has already said that that counts as the provision of services. Next slide, please. Under the statute, Mr. Eves said a very important point that on slide 25 of his presentation, he said that your attorneys and attorneys that he's worked with will tell you that in statutory interpretation, words have meaning. Yes, they have meaning. They must have meaning. We're to strictly follow the directions of the General Assembly. Mr. Eves has said that it was unfortunate what the General Assembly has done to Fulton County by creating a population split from Fulton County in terms of the lost when South Fulton was formed, or when Sandy Springs was formed, or for any matter when any city was formed during the lost cycles of Fulton County. Well, the General Assembly has given us a directive, and we may not like those directives, but we are bound to follow them. And what that directive is under the local option sales tax is clear. There's a limited application of lost proceeds. The statute says the proceeds of the tax, the local option sales tax, the loss, shall be applied to assist the funding of those services provided, and I'm quoting, pursuant to and in accordance with Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution of this state. Next paragraph, the next slide. Article 9, Section 2, Paragraph 3 is on the slide before you. I'm not going to read all those services. There are 14 listed there. This is referred to as the supplementary powers paragraph, or previously the supplementary powers clause of the Georgia Constitution, and it provides a very specific list, 14 numbered lists that county services that counties and cities are authorized and may provide. Counties provide this in their unincorporated area, unless they have a contract with the city. And cities provide this in their municipal areas, unless the city has a contract with a county or another city. That is required by this particular code section, or this particular section of the Constitution. And it is a limitation on the jurisdictional ability to provide any one of these 14 services. Next slide. The Georgia Supreme Court has agreed that the statute says you can only draw upon the 14 services. In the case of Salem versus Tattnall County, the citizens there wanted the county to use local option sales tax to pay for and subsidize education. They wanted to go to the school board. And the taxpayers, and in opposing that, the county actually opposing that said, no, that's not the case. We cannot use it for educational purposes. Why? Because it's not listed in the 14. Georgia Supreme Court's already read the local option sales tax, already decided this question, and the case that was referred to by Mr. Eves, Decatur Taxpayers versus Adams, is not a case discussing local option sales tax at all. So we follow the statute, and then we follow what the judiciary has said the statute says, which is what I already told you it said. And conveniently and for good for us, the courts have already decided this question. So we know that we're only dealing with services that are listed under the Supplementary Powers Clause. Those are the only ones that the proceeds from the tax can be used. Next slide. 8 criteria. There are 8 criteria. I put a plus after the 8 because the statute does allow for you to consider more than those 8. Those are the 8 criteria you should consider, but you could add more to them. Section A of the code section that talks about the division of laws says that the proceeds are only to be used for the 14 services under the supplementary powers paragraph. Section B sets 8 criteria to be used how to divide up the lost proceeds. Several of those criteria, as Mr. Eads has pointed out, discuss services. Well, if you can't spend money on anything other than the 14 listed services in the Supplementary Powers Clause, then there's no need to consider any services beyond the scope of the 8 criteria. Otherwise, you'd actually be spending the money illegally. So the services should focus on the 8 that are listed on the Supplementary Powers Clause. Next slide, please. So examples of services that cannot be considered. As I mentioned, the Supreme Court has already said education cannot be considered. We've got that clearly stated by the court. Likewise, in following the logic of the court and the reasoning of the court, anything that's not listed under the 14 are out. Sheriff, jail and prisoners, tax commissioner, board of elections, court and clerks, board of assessors, and administration are just some examples, but there are more. Mr. Eads gave you a long list of other services the county provides. No doubt important, no doubt central to the well-being of the citizens of Fulton County and the citizens of your cities. But not any one of those were listed under the 14 enumerated services under the Supplementary Powers Clause. Next slide, please. We have a concept that's being applied here called population aggregation. You heard Mr. Eads talk about how to count your citizens. It's a double counting. So I just did it very simply for you what this terminology really breaks down to. Fulton County's population, just over 1 million. Let's add that to Fulton County's municipal population. It's just over 1 million. But those are the same people. It's like counting Dan Lee twice. It's like counting every mayor in this room twice. Then what's not included in the aggregation calculation is adding again the Fulton County unincorporated area population. You'll see that's in italics. And that seems to be left out. Why count the population of the entire Fulton County and then double count the citizens in the cities, but leave out the unincorporated population? Seems like an incomplete aggregate total, but nevertheless, I gave you the full aggregate population. So Fulton County, under the logic and the analysis we've seen, is made up of over 2.1 million people. Next slide, please. Fulton County, as you can see on the left, is almost entirely municipalized. The county has been growing in rates over time with population, and the populations within the unincorporated area, most recently Fulton, South Fulton, it makes up a significant population of the entire county. They decided a majority of that unincorporated area population decided that they wanted to be incorporated. They wanted those services provided by a city government. And they voted for that. General Assembly didn't do anything. The people in this county made that decision. I don't think that's a penalty. I don't think people deciding that they want a closer democratic government closer to them is in any way a penalty. You'll see that highlighted in yellow is the area that's remaining in the unincorporated area of Fulton County. I'm going to round up as 2 square miles. 889 people last decennial census. I think it's lower than that now. Next slide. So dividing up the land area that's to be served. The total area of Fulton County is about 527 square miles. South Fulton was an area, or is an area of 68 square miles. It's about 16.32%. The remaining 2 square miles that's unincorporated Fulton County makes up 0.38% of the entire geographic area of Fulton County. We'll get back to that, why that's important. But you can see, even before Fulton County was formed in 2016, the entire unincorporated area was a land mass of 16.7% of unincorporated county prior to South Fulton forming. Next slide, please. And what has happened since that time? Well, let's just look at public safety, because I think this is very revealing, and it certainly poses a lot of questions. I know the slide's a little difficult to read, but you'll see Public Safety Administration as your first set of columns. And in blue is 2016's expenditures on public safety. Administration, not police, not fire, it's just administration. The blue line is the 2016 expenditures, about 1.7 million, I think. Then you'll see police next to it. You'll see after that I'm having trouble reading myself here. I think it's the prisoners, pretty equal between the 2 years. And I'm comparing this to 2020 because that's the last available data we have. So we're pulling this data off of what Fulton County has reported to the Department of Community Affairs, as signed by the chairman. So the next one is the sheriff, pretty equal. Jail, large increase since in 2020. Fire, you can see a change there. You see the change in police. And then E911, you see an increase between those 2 years. Next slide. Looking closer, public safety expenditures 2016 in blue, and then yellow 2020. Something's happening here. South Fulton, after South Fulton is actually formed, and that 16.38% of the landmass of Fulton County is municipalized and becomes a direct recipient of city services. We see a decrease in the expenditures by Fulton County in police and fire. It's still fire's 3.6 million in 2020, I believe, and 7-something million or 6-something million for police. It's a decrease. But there's a stark increase in public safety administration, up to $32 million. Next slide. Where'd the money go? So we have a reduced landmass of service area for Fulton County, going from 16.7 to 0.38% of the landmass in which is unincorporated area, which is the only area that the Fulton County Police Force is by ordinance allowed to service by the county's own ordinance. It's the only area that the county is allowed to serve by fire or police pursuant to the Constitution. And yet the expenditures really haven't changed in terms of the total amount of expenditures on fire and police and public safety, because they're spending $3 million plus to service fire in the unincorporated area that's 2 square miles. Furthermore, they have a contract with South Fulton in which they pay South Fulton about $340,000 a year for fire coverage. I don't know where the other millions are going. It's a question.
2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then the other one, police. Again, the jurisdiction of the police force is less than 2 square miles. And the budget is somewhere around, I think, 6 million. It dropped precipitously over time, but all the money went somewhere, and the column that grew the most was Public Safety Administration. With the reduction in local option sales tax caused by the formation, by the people voting to form South Fulton, you would think that there would be a property tax increase over time to offset that loss. There's not. It's property tax reduction. You would also think that there would be a substantial reduction in expenditures related to fire and police because you only have 2 square miles to serve. We really don't see that either. We just see money shifting. Next question, next slide. And this poses questions on behalf of all the city taxpayers who subsidize these and other supplementary power services that Fulton provides to approximately 2 square miles and under 900 people. We have questions. Questions that may not be answered here today, but we will listen, and we'll listen for answers in the future as we negotiate out the terms of this loss. But it's to offset the cost of providing supplementary power services. That's at issue. We hope to have a meeting with you July 29th, which is 2 Fridays from today at the same time and same location, if that's possible. That would be our ask today, to set that up so that we may have further discussions. With the data that we received today for the first time that was just handed out during the meeting, it would be nice to take some time to review that. And I think 2 weeks is a reasonable period of time for us to review and digest that information, and then try to come back with an understanding of where the cities think we should be in this negotiation. Next slide. Now, following the commencement of arbitration, Mr. Eads had pointed out that the parties they fail to reach an agreement within 60 days from the kickoff, the commencement of our negotiations. Then the party shall submit the dispute to non-binding arbitration, mediation, or such other means of resolving conflicts. Next slide. The cities that I represent would propose that we go to a 3-person arbitration panel. We set that up. The county would choose one of the arbiters. The cities collectively would choose one of the arbiters. And then those 2 arbiters would then choose the 3rd arbiter. And that way you'd have an odd number to cast a vote as to a decision after all the facts were presented to that panel. And they could consider that panel to consider all the evidence, all of the arguments that Mr. Eads has made, all the arguments that we are making or will make, and have a discussion. We have time to negotiate. So let me be clear. We still have 60 days or less than that, about 45 days or so to negotiate. We'll still work on that. That's our goal. But in this preliminary meeting, one of the objects of your letter, Mr. Chairman, was that we decide how we were going to move this forward, whether we do mediation or how we would resolve it if we couldn't do it collectively, as Mr. Eads has stressed that we should, and I agree. So what we are proposing that we go this way, and we go to use this process, and we have those selections done by August 12th. September 1st would be the end of the 60-day window. So we would ask that the 3rd person by the 2 arbiters be selected by the 1st of September. And then the panel should hold a scheduling meeting for arbitration by then. I am optimistic that we will not get there and we will not need this panel. But I think it's important, in all my practice, my life is geared by deadlines and a calendar. And if I can put it on a calendar when I know things have to be done, and when we have decisions that have to be made by a deadline, they oftentimes get done pretty close to that deadline. I won't say all the time right at the deadline, but pretty close to it. And so I would suggest that we agree today on maybe this proposal here. And that way we have a structure and a schedule going forward. And that may hasten our negotiations and our discussions and hopefully get this resolved before September 1st. Last slide. To be clear to the public and to all the people here, we're not going to sweep the most, I guess, the dirtiest secret, if you will, of this entire negotiation under the rug, and we're not going to leave it unsaid. If the commissioners fail to sign a loss certificate, or the commissioners have an unfair, unfounded demand for an increase in loss, and the cities can't reach an agreement with the county on that number, then under either one of those circumstances, there will be an increase in property taxes for all city taxpayers, which means over almost 1.1 million people. Because that local option sales tax is used to fund and offset the cost of all those services listed under the Supplementary Powers Clause, the 14 services that every government here provides to some degree. Some don't provide any, some provide most all of them. And that's what the lost tax is there to offset. And if we don't have that sales tax from all the revenues of people coming into the conventions and the Falcons and the Hawks and coming to our downtown in Atlanta or coming to visit all the incredible places throughout Fulton County, from Chattahoochee Hills all the way to Milton, if we don't have that revenue coming in as extra revenue from outside of the county, then we lose that sales tax. And that means all property taxes for city taxpayers will definitely go up. There's just no way around that. And so I think this last slide, I want to impress upon everyone in the room that we have a lot of work to do in a very short period of time. And we need to spend that time wisely. I think a schedule helps us be wise and resolve this as quickly as possible, as amicably as possible, and with all the criteria and what the statute says in mind. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You won't mind staying there, Mr. Eves, come on up. So at this point now, are there any, I want to say procedural questions or anything that either of the consultants has said that needs clarification, not negotiation, just clarification?
Interpretations.
Anything at all? And you have a copy of Mr. Eves' presentation, you will receive a copy.
Yes, sir. I have it with, Arthur has a copy on his computer, so he could email it out. That would be fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have both in front of you. So
Digital copy, Mr. Eves?
I'm sorry.
Digital copy of your presentation.
The city, the county has it, they'll email it to you, or if you give me your email address, I'll be happy to email it to
we'll
you.
do that. We'll do it.
I'll give him my email.
Any procedural,
I used to have it.
not procedural, but anything that
Chairman
said
Pitts?
needs- yes.
I guess it sounds like the biggest issue before us is whether or not to follow up with what Andy has proposed with a meeting in 2 weeks.
We're gonna get to the next steps here after this. All right, nothing, going once. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the remainder of the time today, then we're doing great. I really appreciate that. I got several items and there may be others, but first of all, I have here will be the identification of the negotiating teams. Representing the county will be, we have 3 people. I will be one, Commissioner Ellis will be the second one, and Commissioner Arrington will be the third one. Now, from the municipalities, who are we?
It's myself and Mayor Bill.
Hold on one second. Paul and Gilvin, all right. And okay. But on the negotiating team. Okay, 3.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, the question came up as to, for future meetings, would future meetings be limited to the negotiating teams, and then the negotiating teams report back In our case, we would report back to our full board. In your case, you would report back to the respective cities. Is that acceptable?
I think we'd like any mayor that wishes to attend.
And we're going to get to that one as well. All right. Then, yeah, and the question with that though, then if there are four of us, then that becomes a public meeting. There's something not sure how it would relate to others. And if that's the case, I don't want to, personal preferences that we not.
Not trigger an open meetings law issue for.
Is that, okay, let's check that. Mayor Paul was saying that would not trigger an open meeting from the city's point of view. Okay.
As long as there's not a quorum of their board, then that would be fine. They could have two members and it depends on the number of their.
We would have to stay under.
Yeah, it's just three of us.
Well, yeah, but for a city, if the mayor kicks it, it depends on how the charter set up. If the mayor's a voting member or he's part of the quorum configuration, then that could be different, but in most cases, as long as they don't have a quorum of the board.
Okay, we'll work through that. Then someone on Zoom wanted to be heard on this point?
Yes, this is Mayor Ingram. I'm not sure if you all can hear me.
We can, Madam Mayor.
Yeah,
You have the
and so at the last Fulton County meeting that we had, and that is my understanding the last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the mayors at minimum were a part of these meetings, and when there were meetings in between the bigger meetings, i.e. like from today, the decision around whether or not we're moving forward with what Andy recommended and timeline, maybe that's the smaller subcommittee. But I think it's important, and I don't want it to appear that we're trying to like just have a meeting for all cities. These negotiations are very critical, and we do, most of us have the same representation, and we definitely, as Fulton County cities, know that we're stronger together. I'm not necessarily concerned about the public perception or whether or not the meetings are open to the public. I think the public needs to be aware of the things that we're going to be dealing with in cities as well as the county's position as we move forward. And so I just want to make it clear. I mean, the GMA has indicated that they're available on all but 2 dates, and I can't remember those right off. I'll look those up. So we have a space that can definitely, and so if other mayors are in the room that are not a part of the ones that have been mentioned as the negotiation team, to me, which is like after this meeting, next steps, we have these things that we need to decide, having a smaller committee to talk about that in between the meetings and maybe get some resolved before we get to the next meeting where all of the mayors of the cities are represented.
Okay, you were breaking up a little bit, but it sounds to me as if that would be, we worked out among the mayors. That's what I hear you saying. That's what I heard at least. And mayor's agreement with my statement. We hear you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think the expectation is that all of the mayors are going to be at GMA in person. And if there are meetings in between that or decisions that need to be made, i.e. what timeline are we doing arbitration and things that Andy mentioned today, the smaller committee can talk about that.
Okay. All right, so the next item that I have here is that the location of remaining meetings, and we have no objection to continuing to meet here for the meetings. Mr. Mayor?
One point, a correction.
Uh-huh.
One of the municipal consultants, Mike Graham, have the record and future agendas that appropriately identify.
It's Michael Brown, BROWN. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, with respect to future meetings being held here, any objections? We certainly have none. It seems to be neutral ground, okay? Then the Zoom format seems to work. For those who cannot be present, we would allow for I don't know how all the Zoom stuff works, but if there are no objections, we will continue to use Zoom as well. If there are no objections, everybody's nodding in agreement. Then we have a tentative schedule. I think it's been passed around even before today, but the dates that we're talking about will be Friday. Next meeting of the negotiating teams would be Friday, July 22nd, 10 to noon right here. Friday, July 29th, 10 to noon right here. Thursday, August 4th, 10 to noon here. And the reason that is on Thursday is because the 5th would be the day that we have our monthly mayor's meetings. Then Friday, August 12th, 10 to noon here. Friday, August 19th, 10 to noon here. And then August 26th, 10 to noon right here as well. Any issues with the schedule, Commissioner Ellis?
Mr. Chair, I just was going to raise that as a question. I believe in the presentation from the cities, you all had noted July 29th as sort of the desired first time to get back together. And I didn't know if that was something y'all had sort of coalesced around, or did we want to kick off on the 22nd?
Yeah, I think that with the data we've received, it would be helpful to have some time for us to coalesce and meet as well before we have that meeting with you all on the 29th. So the 22nd would afford us the time to meet back
Okay.
here and have those discussions.
So our first formal meeting then would start on the 29th with the combined groups.
If that is all right with the commissioners, that would be helpful to us. Is that all
Well,
right?
I've just learned that Mayor Dickens will not be available on the 22nd, so delaying it to 29th would be helpful.
Fair enough.
Well, it's fine with us, but I'm certain that no matter what date we pick, somebody's not going to be able to be president. But
Well, since he's the sole negotiator for the city of Atlanta, I think it's important for him to be here.
okay, so we'll be, all right, and if no objection, we have no objections. Commissioner Arrington? All right, so the first, I'm sorry, Vice Chair on the schedule.
Yes, good morning, friends. And I hope we all do consider each other still to be friends. Since we don't have, anything today from the cities about what your initial offer might be, I feel like it might be beneficial to have everybody get back together to get that information, or at least be able to observe in some way if the will of the body is to not have all of the commissioners there and have a totally public meeting. But I do think that it does affect all of us. Y'all see the initial presentation we have with concrete numbers. We don't have that yet. So we're all going to have to make the final decision, as you know. So I just think that that allows us to all start off the negotiations with the same information.
Commissioner, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
That is a very fair point. And in our presentation, we were hoping to reconvene on the 29th and present that to you. I'm sorry. We were anticipating that we would come back on the 29th and reconvene and have a called meeting for the Board of Commissioners, and we would be here to present. And Mr. Brown would be able to present the data that supports the numerical value that we would like to see the split between municipal and county shares. And we do want to present that to you, and we would like to do that at the 29th if that's possible.
Commissioner Vice Chair.
So that would be a full meeting again as is this meeting today,
Yes, that would be
not the negotiating teams.
my desire, so that all members of the board can hear it, and all the cities can also hear it, from Atlanta to Sandy Springs and all the other cities.
That's my preference as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hausman. I agree with you.
All right, I'm not sure what we're saying here now. So we'll meet on the idea now is for us to meet as a body again on the 29th. Where are you, Vice Chair? To hear information, not to negotiate again. Just to
Well,
hear.
I mean, we don't know where they are. They know where we are. You've got 2 weeks to come up with your position. I just think to start off on a level playing field, it would be good for all of us to hear both of our positions in the room.
Well, we've heard
initially.
ours on the time. The purpose of that meeting. Is that-
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that's so we would come back, we would make the presentation, give you our numbers. That would afford Mr. Eves some time to review that data as well. And then the negotiation teams can convene on the 4th of August to have some discussions. Now, I don't think that bars anyone from discussing a schedule. And I think that's very important that we come up with a schedule and or the mediator arbitrator approach.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with receiving the city's data on the 29th. I think that's appropriate because as Vice Chair Houseman said, they've got our data now. We don't have theirs. The August 4th may be a little tough because they will have had at that point 3 weeks to parse our data, rebuttal. I'll have 5 days to look at their data. We'll do it, but it would have been helpful if we'd had their data today as we provided ours as well.
Chairman, I also agree that is a concern of mine. If there's a possibility to get their information before the 29th, not trying to put any additional pressure on them, but if it's possible to get it emailed, I would like that if possible for more time. Thank you.
We will work to accommodate that. If we can have it before the 29th meeting, we'll get together and send it to you.
Well, what I'm hearing is on the 29th, we're still discussing is on the 29th, you are requesting that this group meet again here to hear your presentation. We've heard ours.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, to provide you with the numbers.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. Yeah, but we come back here for the sole purpose of hearing his presentation.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Commissioner Ellis.
Mr. Chair, in light of the fact that the cities have desired for any mayor to be able to participate, in any of the sessions, it sounds like. I mean, we would have to decide on our end, since the obligation, if it's an open meeting, for us to do all the recording and all that sort of stuff. That would be on us to figure out. But in light of that, and also in light of some of the time constraints we got, rather than have a meeting on August 4th and then turn around and have a joint mayor's meeting on the 5th, it'd be my proposal that we not have a meeting we have a meeting on the 5th, but it'd be exclusive to Lost.
Okay.
And not have our routine mayor's meeting, since we're going to have all of us here anyway, potentially. So.
We'll see enough.
Yeah. And
So
so,
that,
yeah.
anything else on this? So here's what I'm hearing. Correct me if I'm incorrect, that nothing on the 22nd. But we will reconvene on the 29th in this room, all of us, for the purpose of hearing the presentation from the municipalities consultant. That will be the only item on the agenda that day. Then which shouldn't take, how much time do you need?
No more time than Mr. Eves took today. I don't.
All right, 30 minutes, 10 o'clock. We should be done by 10:30 on the 29th.
Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Yes.
One issue that was raised by the cities was the form of negotiation of the mediation process, the alternative dispute resolution.
Hold on, I want to get to that point. Let's finish the
sorry, I
schedule here now.
apologize.
So after the 29th, on the 4th, we're going to do, Commissioner Ellis is suggesting that we meet on the 5th, and that regular mayor's meeting be limited, just Lost. Any objections to that? Commissioner Motley Broom? We can, it's fine, here. All right, Mayor Motley Broom, any objections?
My hand is raised in Zoom. I'm not sure if anyone can see it as well.
Oh, that's Mayor.
All right, Mayor Ingram, go ahead.
Yes. Am I breaking up? Because if I'm breaking up, I'll limit my comments. Can you hear me clearly?
Now we can, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I've heard several times that the cities didn't have a position today, and that it's been mentioned twice. And so I want to address the fact that we are as prepared as we could have been, given the fact that we didn't receive information. And even the rumor mill didn't anticipate that the county was going to be asking for 35% today. And so I think as we talk about moving forward and having the meeting on the 29th, I mean, what was going to be the position, we're all aware of what our population percentages are. And I think it was mentioned during the presentation, even by the county's consultant, of the 4.9 or the small percentage of population that is currently within unincorporated Fulton County. And so I think as we move forward and as we're talking about positions and being prepared, had we received the county's presentation and position prior to during the meeting today, maybe that would have been shared today from cities. I think moving forward, as we talk about the meeting on July 29th, to limit that meeting to 30 minutes is, I think, unreasonable. That we should at least act as if there's going to be some level of good faith communication and discussion. This initial meeting set by the county was for 2 hours. So at least an hour for the meeting on July 29th, so that we can digest this position that we now have in the county for 35%, with less than 5% of the population, and be prepared to see, what the city's position is, as well as maybe have some level of negotiation around it. So I would ask on the 29th that the meeting be at least an hour. And remember, when we're talking about Fulton County residents and constituents, those are the same resident and constituents in each of our cities. So we're talking about all the same people. And the desire is absolutely to continue to be people focused and not hurt our people, and to alleviate the hurt that they've experienced through the pandemic and beyond, and continue to be people focused. And so there's no intent by the cities to hurt our people in our cities. I think we've shown that we're people first and people focused, and will collaborate to make that happen, especially during the CARES Act fight that we had to have. But as we move forward, I think July 29th, we need to make sure that there's at least an hour for a meeting. We started this meeting with the county repeatedly indicating that they were on a tight time crunch today. I would hate to show up on July 29th and only be limited to 30 minutes for a meeting because the county or others have a tight time crunch, because everybody's only anticipating a 30-minute meeting.
All right, let's do this. On the 29th, the date that the proposed schedule was changed because the city's consultant wanted an additional 30 minutes for his presentation. Let's keep it all from 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock on the 29th, 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock on the 29th. But you've indicated that you only need 30 minutes though to make your presentation, but we will allocate more time for us to be here on the 29th. All right. Now, Commissioner Motley Broom. Strike that, Mayor Motley Broom.
Yeah, I haven't gotten, I know where I sit. My only concern about having the mayor's meeting devoted strictly to lost is getting the information that we would have received in that mayor's meeting. And so if there's a way for us to get the updates that we typically get, just emailing those, what's going on in terms of COVID response, et cetera, if we can just make sure that we still receive that information, even if we don't have formal conversations about it at that time.
Okay, I don't think the agenda has been prepared, but whatever's on that agenda, we can disseminate it prior to the this presentation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a comment too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to follow up on that. We met yesterday or Wednesday now, and all of the COVID information that we received is on our website. So I would just ask that the clerk send that out to all the mayors so that you have what the current information is.
Mr. Chairman, if I just could ask Michael Brown, would you stand up in the back? He's here today. Michael, is that 30 minutes plenty of time for you? All right, thank you, Michael.
Okay, then following that, I got the 29th, then the 5th. Now the schedule that I had here was August 12th. Is that enough time between the 12th, August 19th, August 26th? Any objections?
All those dates look good.
All those dates are good. Any objections? All right, then we'll follow that schedule.
Mr. Chair, just
Yeah, yes, sir.
point of clarity.
Yes, sir.
Are those going to all be public meetings, or those will just be the negotiating team meetings after?
That's what I talked about earlier, that the negotiating team would meet on those dates. And that it would be the responsibility of the negotiating teams to keep their respective bodies abreast of what we're doing for input.
It's only the first July 29th meeting is the only public.
Correct.
Mayor Motley Broom has her hand up.
She said she does not.
Oh, that's Mayor Holiday Ingram.
That's Holiday Ingram that had hand.
Mayor Holiday Ingram, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. GMA is not, the space is not available on August 9th or August 12th. And so for the meeting on August 12th, we would need to have another location, maybe at the county. Those were the only 2 dates out of all of the dates shared where the GMA space was not available. And for clarification, Chairman, when you indicated the negotiation team would attend the meetings moving forward, you were speaking from the county's perspective? The negotiation team members from the county? Can you all hear me?
You were breaking up a little. Repeat that, Madam Mayor.
So I said that GMA space is not available on August 9th or 12th. Those were the only 2 dates out of all of the dates provided where it was not available. So we need to find a date, a location for August 12th, if that will be the county. And then the other question I asked is when you mentioned, Chairman, that moving forward, the negotiation team would attend the meetings, were you referring to the negotiation team for the commissioners who are on the negotiation team, or regarding the mayor's side?
I was referring to our negotiating team.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And then the meeting on the 12th, if there are no objections, if this room is not available on the 12th, we can meet at in our assembly hall, if there are no objections to that. And I'm making an assumption now that it's available. If it's not available, we'll make it available on the 12th. Or the conference room, okay. But we'll clarify that and notify you accordingly. Any other comments regarding next steps? We're doing great time-wise, and I appreciate that. All right. Now, I did have a note here, so if the city is going to have that 30 minutes or less, depending on what you need on the 29th, Mr. Eads, if you need to say something else at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It says the cities will have a combined total of 1 hour, the 30 minutes today, the 30 minutes of that next meeting to make their case. I would like to have an additional 30 minutes to extend and revise any comments that I've made to further cement the county's position.
Any objections to that? All right.
No, so we welcome Mr. Eads.
Do not object, and I don't see any mayors objecting. All right, anything else today? Anything else today?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner?
To caution us to be guided. I saw on that last slide, if the commissioners don't do A or if the commissioners don't do B, if the parties don't agree, right? And so I would caution us not to try to start positioning this as one against the other. It's not if the commissioners don't agree or don't or fail to ask for increases, if the parties don't agree. And so I just want us to be mindful of that and be guided by, the burden is on all of us and not trying to shift that burden onto one party or the other. I think that makes negotiation a little more difficult.
I think it's appropriate. Anything else?
Chairman.
Yes,
I would ask
Mr. Mayor Paul.
representatives to stick around after this meeting for a very quick meeting.
Okay.
believe Mayor Wilson raised his hand.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes, Chairman Pitts, how are you, sir?
Fine, sir. You have the floor. Good to see you.
Great to see you, sir. Thank you for let me have the floor. I believe there's a question that was asked by Andy about respecting perhaps trying to get an agreement on the arbitration question. I think that he put in his presentation. I think that question possibly could be on the floor before we leave today.
All right.
I don't think we have any objection to using three-panel arbitrators. I don't know how, it may be a little challenging to have those two select the third arbitrator. I had challenges with that before. It might be easier if the two of you all suggested the third person, but I'm sure we can work that out.
And to be clear, this would be non-binding, so it's, obviously, this is still within the discretion of all the governing authorities. Doug and I were just talking about that, and let's see if the two mediators can arbitrators can figure it out. And if they can't, then Doug and I can work on that. I'm sure that we could figure a solution out. It's a good point. I'm glad you're amenable to it.
I just want to acknowledge that Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens is also on the Zoom.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Anything else today? Anything else? Let me thank everyone for your presence today, and that's been requested by Mayor Paul that the mayors remain. So thank you all so much and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just like the way.
Hey, Rusty, are you going to keep this Zoom going so we can stay on here?
Okay.
Hey, Rusty.
This is on the Fulton County site. I don't know that there's a
That's
good.
right. Yeah, that's good. That's a great point. So we need to remove ourselves from this and try to reconvene back in there.
Or somebody could send out